Whether you're a Planet Coaster Pro or just starting out, in Planet Coaster 2, there's a few key steps are essential to build a successful park from day one. Today I'll be going through all the important stuff to remember starting out. For this, I've created a brand new challenge park, and I'll be explaining step by step everything you need to know to help turn a solid profit right from the outset. So here we are, brand new challenge park. First things first, we need a path. Paths don't cost anything to build, at least they don't in the medium difficulty setting, which I'm playing here. That gives you the luxury to build big wide paths, which will prevent guests getting into bottlenecks and spending too much time squeezing through crowds rather than spending their money on rides and at the concession stands. To build this, I'm using the Stamp Builder path option, which is the quickest way to build basic paths with the least amount of fiddling. This isn't going to look particularly pretty, but I'm not building this park for looks. It's all about efficiency for this one. This is a typical layout I use for Planet Games. It needs to be large enough for guests to navigate freely, but compact enough that staff aren't needing to travel long distances between their workstations, and we can also get maximum efficiency from the range of things like the power generators. Before I put the power down though, I want to get all the facilities down that we'll need to start off with, so that I can position these in a place where they'll all be covered by the initial power source we put down. To speed things along here and avoid half the video being a build tutorial, I've pre-created a block of guest facilities and saved this as a blueprint. For faster park development, I'd recommend doing this. Build a basic block of facilities, save it as a blueprint, and you'll have a ready-made set of shops and whatnot that you can use in every new build. There's this nifty filter in the Blueprints tab where you can find all your own creations. So it's a really easy way to have all the basic park setup stuff right there ready for you. This is my basic amenities block, and yeah, as you can see here, you've got that big red power icon that means they're all going to need power to work. That's fine, we'll set that up in a moment, but as you can see, because I've saved this as a blueprint, I can now place this all in one go and it'll align nicely with the path here. This is also why it's good to go with a square layout at first if you're just wanting a park for profit rather than making it look good, because there we go, it places no problem. Next step is to get these powered up, so it's back into the facilities tab and let's look at what we need for power. We'll get the generator in first. Now, I want to be careful where I put the generator because I want it to be accessible to staff quite easily. So this block behind these new facilities I've put in is ideal because I can create a staff path down here. With that in, we are also going to need a distributor because even though the generator will create power, well, it'll generate power, it can't distribute it. So we can't do anything even in this section without putting a distributor here. May as well get this down right next to the generator. And see there, it wants to connect up. Right, we'll do this properly. This little icon here, use this to connect distributor to the generator. And there we go. We've got the lovely yellow colour for marking out the sphere of power generation we've got now in the park in the heat map. You can also see the red icon above the amenities. That's now green, and that's showing us that these are now powered. You will notice though they are still closed in Planet Coaster 2. You have to manually open all of the shops. They don't just automatically open when you place them anymore. We can do this straight away in this box here. Tick that and the shops will now open. So we'll do that for all of them. All that's left is to briefly unpause the game and there we go, shops are operational. My next task to get this park ready for guests. Now, when we added the power generator, that created negative influence on guests, which you can see in the scenery heat map. So head on over to scenery and yep, see that big red mark now that we've got here in the middle of the path? That's been created by that power generator there. You get rid of that negative influence by using scenery pieces to cover it up. Every scenery piece in the game, we'll use this one here to demonstrate this. Once you've placed it, click back into the item and see in the advanced settings, every scenery piece has a scenery score. What that means is the game will calculate scenery scores in the background and create a positive effect in the area of influence. So back in the scenery heat map, we can see here that tiny little piece of rail that I've placed, that's now having a tiny impact on the scenery score in that area. So if I move this to the red patch here where the generator's affecting it, in theory that should now be having a tiny influence on that square to reduce the negative influence of the generator. some pieces of scenery, the score is higher than others. I did a little research on this to find the cheapest scenery piece with, by comparison, the highest scenery score, because we can use this to game the system here and create an incredibly high scenery score for a low price. What I've found is there's a tiny mythology fence post here, and this is my secret weapon for this technique. Let's take a look. Let's click on it again. So this is $3.50 for one fence, which is actually pretty low compared to some of the other scenery pieces. Let's place this down and we'll go and take a look at its score. So back into the piece and into the advanced settings. $420 for that one tiny $3.50 piece of fence post. Now, one of these on their own here still isn't going to be enough to negate that negative influence, so we need to start adding a few more of these. Right, let's get the heat map up so we can see this in action. Basically, my technique here is to just keep adding these fence posts on top of each other until that red colour moves over to blue. And yeah, there we go. We are starting to see a deeper blue now, so it shouldn't be that many more. And I think that's it. That's achieved a maximum score for that block. So probably about 8 to 10 posts there. So that's one square we've sorted out, but as we saw with the heat map, there's plenty more of the red around this generator, so we're going to have to repeat that process. Now, there is a shortcut to do this. We need to make a scenery group using the multi-select tool. On computer, there's a shortcut for this, so press I and that'll bring up the multi-select group. Drag the mouse across the fence post and that'll select them all. That has also picked up the path, so need to deselect that. Don't want to be repeating the path in this group. That's just the fence post now, so click the confirm selection and that will group all of those into one scenery group. Now that we have that in a group, we know that this is enough to make one of those squares go completely blue. So what we can do is take that group and just keep placing this now around the generator, and that will get rid of all that negative influence there. And there we go, the final one. That is enough now to get rid of any negative influence from the generator and whatnot in the middle there. It's all gone. It's now great scenery according to the guests. It does feel a bit like cheating because, yeah, this isn't pretty. It's rather ugly, but according to the guests, it doesn't matter, does it? The point with this method is this is a great way to build up cash early game, and then you can go back and fix it and make it look nice when you've got enough money to do so. Moving on to the next task, I need to add staff facilities. First of all, we want a mechanics workshop because this is what we'll use to generate research for the park. For the challenge modes of the game, you don't have everything unlocked when you start. You are limited to certain rides and certain coasters, and you do research with the mechanic to unlock points that you can put towards unlocking more and more rides and stuff as you progress. Also got his staff room down, of course, because the staff are going to need somewhere to go when they want to take a break. Now check the heat map, and yep, like the generator, this has created a negative area where guests do not like looking at these facilities. So we're going to have to post this up like we did with the generator to get rid of that. This is all set up now. I've added a staff path, and that means we can open the mechanics workshop. So go into the workshop and select this to open. This will automatically employ a mechanic for us, and they are also automatically set to research. This brings us to the next key step for opening our park, managing the staff schedules. This can be fiddly, so I'll take time to explain this properly. To find the schedules, go into the staff tab, and over the side here, we've got staff schedules. This takes you to the schedule page, which gives a breakdown where you can see what all of your staff are doing over the course of their workday. Actually, I forgot, before we do the schedule, we need to do the work zones. So out of here, go back into the staff tab, and to the side of the schedules, you can see here it says work zones. This is where I can set up an area as a specific work zone so that staff assigned to this zone, they will only ever work around this section of the park, and that avoids a lot of inefficiency later on down the line. To set this up, I need to create new work zone, and this brings up the work zone brush, and I can literally just paint the area that I want to call work zone 1, that the staff that I've got around here, they will only ever work in this area. Now we can go back into the staff schedule and set this up correctly. Whilst we haven't employed any staff ourselves yet, by opening up the mechanics workshop and all of those guest facilities, the game has auto-employed staff to work in those. There is a lot of information in here, so I find it easier to filter by staff category. We'll start with the mechanic. Since they were auto-employed when I opened up the workshop, they've already been set by the game to be researching in that specific workshop for the entire day, so there's nothing I need to do with this person. However, I do need to check on the vendors because we employed so many of them in one go. So 6 vendors here, and first thing to check is when they have scheduled breaks. They all have 1 break per day, and I need to make sure that none of those breaks are clashing because you don't want to have 2 people on a break at any one time. Looks like the game's already considered this, so I don't really need to do anything about the breaks at least. What I want to do with the vendors though is set each of them to work zone 1 to ensure continuous shop coverage. Unlike the mechanic, since the vendors are customer facing, shops can't operate when they're on break, which will halt revenue. By hiring 1 extra vendor for work zone 1, I can keep 1 vendor free to cover shifts when another goes on break. To set the work zone, I need to click on the employee schedule and go to advanced settings. And right at the top here, I need to change this from none to work zone 1. I'll then select apply all day, and then that has switched this worker's schedule so that they're working in work zone 1 all day. Now I'd need to do that for the rest of the staff. Right, I've been through them all. They're now all set up in work zone 1. Now it's time to employ that additional vendor to make sure we've got coverage during breaks. So I'll select our new vendor here and we'll just drop them in. And I'll go through that same process with them to set the work zone as work zone 1. Next task, we need another mechanic in the park. We've got 1 that's set to doing research, so we're going to need another mechanic that is dedicated to doing repairs and servicing. Back in the schedule, just check that they're doing services and repairs and make sure that's set to all day in work zone 1. There is also 1 more step needed for the mechanic, setting a regular service schedule. If equipment like the power generator isn't serviced on time, its condition will deteriorate and eventually only an expensive emergency refurbishment can restore it. I've found that the mechanics don't automatically service equipment reliably, so it's essential to schedule regular checks. Based on earlier testing, I found scheduling service every other hour generally prevents issues, although high maintenance items like big rides, they might need more frequent checks. A good starting point though is to schedule every other hour, so let's do that now for the power generator. Scheduling services, we need to go back into the advanced settings and this column right here. Click on the icon and it'll tell me we're going into selection mode, so confirm that. Now it wants me to select a piece of equipment, so let's click the generator and there we go. That is now scheduled. On that hour, the mechanic will visit the power generator and give it a service. I will now need to repeat that process for the rest of their day, making sure there is a scheduled service at the power generator every other hour. Okay, that's the vendor setup, that's the mechanic setup, but there are a few other members of staff we're going to need before we open up. So back in the staff tab, let's get ourselves a couple of janitors. Actually, let's get 4 in total. There is a reason for that. I found janitors assigned to work zones. They're not emptying bins right now, which I think might be a bug. I am recording this during the early access period, so I'm guessing that might get fixed in a later update. For now, I'm employing more janitors than I need and letting 2 of them roam free so that they'll empty bins. Since we've got janitors now, we probably should get them something to do, so let's put down some bins and benches. I always find with the Planet games you need way more bins and benches than you think you'd need, so we'll have a hefty amount here. That's all the staff and facilities we need to start. Now we can finally add some rides. For a solid cash flow, the important thing to remember with rides, at this stage we want to achieve the highest prestige score we can. This is based on a few factors, so how exciting the ride is, the fear factor and the nausea rating. We want exciting rides that provide some fear but not too much and a low nausea rating. We can also get a scenery bonus to the overall score by decorating rides too. The higher the prestige, the more popular it'll be, with guests willing to pay a higher fee, and that's really important for securing success of the park. Starting out, a majority of the rides and coasters are currently unavailable until we can unlock these using research points that we've accumulated, so we are limited right now to a couple of rides and a couple of coasters. I've assessed what we've got and there's only a few can achieve a decent prestige score. The best option for maxing this out is the cube. So I'll place this down and talk you through how you can go about maxing out the prestige score for this. Now before I place this down, I'm going to bring back up the power heat map because I want to make sure that this is going to be placed in an area where it's already got power, so I don't have to put down another distributor for it to work. So let's view the power map again, and there you can see, well, we've got our yellow circle, haven't we? So this needs to go down in an area where it's within that circle so it works, but try and keep it as far along to the edge as we can so that we're maxing out the space. Taking a look at the prestige score right now, it's just 2 and a bit stars, which isn't very good. But if we look at the breakdown here, the ride experience is 460, which is actually really good. Anything over 500 is what we want for maximum prestige, and we can get there with this ride with a few tweaks. What's bringing the score down currently is the scenery bonus because we've not got any scenery yet. So we'll fix that to get that score up to maximum 2. Reason I'm caring so much about the prestige, it's to do with the reputation represented here at the bottom. All rides and coasters go through a cycle of reputation. When it's first opened, the reputation is new, and that will increase popularity, meaning we can earn more from it. This will gradually transition to dated, and popularity at this stage will drop. Then there'll come a period of resurgence where the popularity will turn, and that leads us to the final stage. The ride becomes old, meaning it will drop in popularity from this point onwards and may even become unprofitable, where best thing to do in that situation would be to replace the ride entirely. However, rides don't always become old. There is a special stage here whereby if you can max out the prestige score to 5 stars after resurgence, instead of becoming old, it'll attain a classic status, and that means it will maintain popularity for the rest of its life. I would say for a challenge or a franchise park, we really want that status, so let's make this happen here for the Cube. First thing I want to set up, I want to maximize profit, so I'm going to add a priority queue. You enable this in the Finance tab and just turn the option on. Now we can place the ride entrance and exit gates and the paths associated with them. My tips for this, as mentioned, I would use priority queues where you can. You may get the odd complaint here or there of people that haven't bought the passes that don't like people skipping ahead of them, but end of the day, you are going to make more money from implementing them than not. Another tip to do with queue pathing, you don't need to make them very long. I've found with every ride that I've built so far, guests aren't very tolerant of queue times, so even this queue path here for the Cube, this is quite a small path, but this is ample room for the amount of guests that will be waiting here. So that's the queues in now. Next step is to improve that prestige score. To do that, I'll be using the same strategy as before with the wooden posts. Like I mentioned, this does look pretty awful, but this park right now, the focus is on maximising scores and efficiency. Making this look good will come later when we have more cash to play with. This technique does work slightly differently when you're trying to build up a prestige score for a ride, rather than just hiding negative influence of the power generators and such. What I'm looking for here is to make the entire ride go this deep blue colour. That means the posts are going to look even odder than they did before, and there's going to be more of them than there was in the previous section. This is completely covered now, so I need to go back into the ride, into the prestige tab, and check what that's done to the overall score. We can see here the score is up, but it's not at its maximum yet. The maximum scenery bonus you can get is 500, so we'll continue laying down more wooden posts until we hit that 500. Alright, couple more posts, and we have indeed hit the scenery bonus maximum of 500 there. But if you notice at the top, the ride still hasn't achieved full stars yet. It's almost there. This is like 4 3/4 stars. If we want this to become a classic ride, we have to achieve 5 stars. Adding more scenery now won't change anything. It's hit the maximum for that. Any additional prestige now has to come from the ride experience. And luckily, with this ride in particular, there is something we can do about that. We can change the sequence so it's slightly more exciting. Where it's got a forward flip for the first sequence, I can change that to be a reversal spin, and yeah, I wouldn't ride this. That is just far too intense with 2 massive spins at the front and the back of the sequence. But this makes a big difference to the score. I do have to test it again because we've changed something in the sequence. The ride has to be tested so it can calculate the nausea and the fear and the excitement again. So I'll let it do its thing and come back to this when it's ready to finish. That's the end of the ride. We've got a new score. Let's see what it's done to the prestige. There we go, score of 540 for the ride experience now, and that has bumped us up to 5 stars, 1,000 points. Maximum reputation, and if you notice down in the bottom, it has changed the reputation, so instead of becoming an old ride at the end, it'll now become a classic ride. Granted, that is going to be a long time away, but it means we don't have to worry about this ride in the future. We don't have to replace it, anything like that. It's going to be a good earner in the future. One problem with this is this has made the Cube an intensely nauseous ride, and people are going to get sick on this ride. Now, in previous Planet Coaster, to deal with sickness, you had a medical bay that you could place down close by to nauseous rides, and that would resolve it for the guests. There isn't such a thing in Planet Coaster 2. Instead, what you have to do is space out the intense rides that are going to make people sick with nice, gentle rides. If the guests get too sick and they're going on too many rides that are too nauseating for them, then they'll just leave, which we don't want. So my next task is to build a more gentle ride right next to the Cube. I've already gone through the ride menu, and we are limited on the rides we've got here, and it would be nice to have another ride that could hit that classic status, but at the moment we don't have any that are available to us that can achieve that, even with tweaking. So we go with the next best option, which is to go for the highest level of prestige we can achieve. For this, I'll be using the teacups, and I'll be doing the same strategy as with the Cube. We'll be building this up with the scenery to maximize that at least. We'll get a priority queue path in as well, and unfortunately, even messing with the sequence with the teacups, it doesn't bring it up to that 1,000 points. So we'll live with that. That's the teacups in. Next, I want to add a coaster. Like with the flat rides, we're limited at the start to just a few types of coaster. I'm not great at building my own coasters. They typically look pretty janky, but the blueprints we have available here aren't hitting the mark in terms of the prestige score. Building your own coasters is a great way to make 5-star attractions, since you have full control of adjusting the track to get the excitement, fear and nausea just right. So I've persevered, and I have built myself a 5-star wooden coaster, and I've saved this as a blueprint, so let's get that down. This is my 5-star wooden coaster monstrosity. It took hours of tweaking to get the excitement, fear and nausea where it needed to be, and it does look pretty terrible. I'm sorry about that, I can't help it. It does the job, and that's all I care about right now. Before we can open this one, it does need to recalculate the scores again, so we'll test that and then we'll run through the stats. Finish testing, all stats are green. So prestige for this ride, as you can see there, it is a 5-star ride, meaning it will eventually achieve classic status. Get this open, and that's all the attractions I need at the start to turn a healthy profit. I'll also need to employ a few more mechanics and ride operators, set their schedules like we did with the other employees, and make sure all of these rides I've added are scheduled for regular servicing. Since all the attractions we've got in have a high prestige, one more thing we can do to maximise profit is set the pricing. We could set an entry fee, but I found it safer to leave this as free entry at the start to encourage more people into the park, and instead set the ride fees in line with the prestige score. To set prices for rides, go into the Finance tab, and there's a bunch of options here. The default is custom price, but something we can do now is set dynamic pricing. This means the cost will vary depending on the popularity. It will set a minimum and maximum price, and I think this is a great way to get the most out of your rides without having to micromanage the finances. So I don't have to keep tabs on guest thoughts and people refusing to ride because it's too expensive, or worrying that I've made it too cheap. So for now, I'll set this for all of the 3 rides we've got. That's everything I need to do at this time to turn a healthy profit at the start. I'll let this run for a while, then we'll take a look at the stats. I've let the game play on and completed about half a day's trading, so if I go into the park management screen, we can take a look at the finances here and see how it's doing. Prestige isn't great right now because we're just starting out. We haven't got enough attractions yet, but the ones we do have, I have been making sure they are maximum prestige where possible, and if not, we're achieving the best we can with them. The scenery is good. No surprises there with our wooden post cheaty method there. Unique attractions, that's the worst to score, obviously because we're just starting out and yeah, we don't have enough attractions yet. We need to add more stuff into the park to improve this. Park reputation's good though, and that's because we're taking the time to set staff up properly, there's enough facilities, and it's all operating efficiently, so that's why we've got a good score there. What I'm really interested in is the finances. This is definitely a good curve. We are indeed in profit. Let's take a look at the breakdown. Yep, there's the confirmation. Revenue from income is clearly surpassing the costs. So all of this is my definitive guide for establishing a park that will generate profit from day one. Hope it's been helpful. Now, you may notice you can hear splashing in the background right now. And that's because I've played on, and a similar tutorial for establishing the water park stuff will be following soon, so be sure to check that out if you want more tips for implementing this method for the water park stuff too. Thanks for watching, I'll catch you next time.